Hello and welcome to today's video. Today we're here for the final time this season, this year, for the racing debrief. We're going to wrap up this whole series. And of course, we're going to talk about F1 and the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. So let's jump right into it. What we see in the race, what we think about it. Of course, some of the drivers had a few minutes less of practice, basically a session less for a lot of the drivers, by having a lot of the young drivers out on the track doing their practice. Of course, it's an F1 rule that every driver has to give up at least one session throughout the season to a younger driver that has done 2 or less F1 races. So a lot of the teams save it for Abu Dhabi just because there's a little bit less on the line in the last race. Typically, you don't want to be putting a rookie out there in mid-season when you maybe in a fight, maybe a track you can learn some stuff at Abu Dhabi. You're not going to learn something for the next race necessarily as much. So I think it's all those things are factors in why you see a lot of those practice sessions, the FP ones in Abu Dhabi, being done by those drivers. So a lot of drivers missed out on a little extra practice, so shook things up a little bit for the race, but not that much. So in the race, I mean, Max kind of dominated this one again, as you kind of seen throughout the whole season. So, 19 wins on the year, 1,000 laps led, very, very impressive. The main fight, though, of course, during this race was between Ferrari and Mercedes for who was going to finish second in the Constructors' Championship. Of course, you can make an argument: do you finish third or do you finish second? Like, where do you want, right? Because if you finish second, obviously you get the rights of saying you finished second. You can say, we were the second best team in 2023, right? We achieved what we wanted to. You get more money, and you get the second pit stop for the next season. The thing about it is that if you finish third, you get more development time. You get a little bit more wind tunnel percentage, I believe 5% more wind tunnel time than the two teams in front of you. So, you can argue whatever one you want. Personally, I'd probably just want to go for second. I mean, I want to get second instead of third in the standings. But, what was it going to be? So, going through it, going through the race, you had Charles Leclerc starting second. George Russell was fifth, I believe. Fourth or fifth, something like that. You had Lewis Hamilton in 10th or 11th, and Carlos Sainz in about 15th. So those were the main players throughout that race. And pretty much throughout the race, Charles Leclerc was holding second. He didn't really go outside of second, obviously outside of pit stops. So he held that spot. George Russell drove his way up to third. So again, very close between them. So how was that all going to play out? Of course, Carlos Sainz went very, very long. He didn't pit till lap 57 for his second pit stop. Ferrari was hoping for a safety car, kind of get moved up the field, but that didn't really work out for him. Lewis Hamilton was about 8th the whole race. He didn't have the best race. So it all came down to that. And at the end, you had Checo was going through the field, and it looked like he was going to get up to at least third. So he then got a dumb time penalty for, I think he hit Lando Norris. Yeah, he hit Lando Norris and got a 5-second penalty for really something that didn't look like it was 5-second penalty worthy. Either way, that penalty ended up impacting the championship very heavily because he passed George Russell, but he got a 5-second penalty. So Charles Leclerc kind of moved over, let Checo go by, hoping that he could build that gap and get Ferrari second. But it did not happen. So very, very close. I believe it was 3 points that Mercedes was ahead by, which is interesting because I felt like, when you look at the year, it was back and forth between them. You would have thought them, Ferrari getting a win compared to Mercedes, which didn't. Ferrari's the only other team besides Red Bull to get a win. So I think it's one of those things that you would have thought Ferrari would have been second. But again, very, very close between them. I was hoping Ferrari would be able to pull that off and get second over Mercedes. But it did not happen. So Yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say on the race. I mean, outside of that, there's a lot of action throughout the field, a lot of passing. Interesting strategy, who's going two, who's going one stop. Pretty much everybody's going two stop, though, but kind of interesting to see how that played out. Yuki Tsunoda leading a few laps, that was interesting. Definitely not something that I would have thought going into the race we'd see Yuki Tsunoda lead. And again, Max getting to 1,000 laps led in a season is just absolutely insane. And again, 19 wins last year. Abu Dhabi, he got his 15th win of the season. So to bump that number up to 19, I mean, outside of Singapore, he probably could have won even two more. So, yeah, very, very dominant season. As a fan of Red Bull and a fan of Max, it was fun to watch. It's one of those things that when you see your driver win that much, those moments stand out, and when you look back at it in a few years, it really stands out. It's gonna be one of those special things. I mean, looking back, I guess a good comparison to that is seeing NASCAR in 2020, how much Kevin Harvick dominated that. Of course, playoffs impact who the true champion of the season should be. So he didn't win the championship that year. But again, when you see those moments, those clips of like just how dominant that year was, it really stands out. It's special to look at that. So I think looking at the achievements, a year or two from now, will be very, very special. I mean, there's nothing that's going to be more special than that 2021 final race, that final lap. Seeing the highlights of that always bring back, very special moments. But when you look at this year and the dominance and just every race, Max being on it, it's yeah, it'll be a special one to look back on in 2024, 2025, like when those highlights get shown again, a few years. But yeah, it's just been awesome. Really, really cool to see the team that you like and the driver that you like just dominate. And yeah, it's special. So you just got to remember those moments because again, kind of like Sebastian Vettel said on his team radio, like you never know basically when those moments are gonna end, so you got to take those moments in. Basically, he said something like along those lines. Got to cherish the moments, right? So who knows? I mean, Red Bull's in a good spot to probably win a good amount of races in the next 2 years. But I mean, after 2025, who knows where the rules go in 2026? So you just gotta really enjoy the moment when it's there, and that's what I try to do every week. So, with that, thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode of the Racing Debrief and the Racing Debrief all year. It's really been fun to jump into this type of content, discussing racing. Obviously, as we get here in the final race, it's pretty much just discussing F1, but a lot of those weeks where we discuss NASCAR and F1 back to back, multiple NASCAR races, F1 with a sprint weekend, like it was very, very fun to go dive into those where we had 5 or 6 different parts of a race to discuss. So yeah, I liked it. Obviously, we've done something kind of similar to this a few years ago. We kind of had a preview and a review episode, but I think that the Racing Debrief is kind of fun to sit down here for 10, 15 minutes, go through the race, discuss what I thought about it. So, I do plan to come back with the Racing Debrief in early February, when the NASCAR season begins. So yeah, just be ready for that. So, Racing Debrief will be back in February, but we're looking forward to just a little bit of a little chill time for Racing Debrief for now. And yeah, we'll be back in February. So thank you all for watching. Not only today's episode of the Racing Debrief, but the Racing Debrief all season. It's been very, very fun, again, discussing NASCAR and F1 topics in this series. And we'll see you guys in the next one.